Hi, I'm Dana, and it's time for this week's question. It comes from Lisa. She writes, Adam is 5.5 months old and is napping pretty well during the day, but still isn't sleeping through the night. He wakes about 4 times a night, and his longest sleep is 3 hours. My girlfriends say it's because I'm breastfeeding. How do I get him to sleep through the night? The fact that he's breastfeeding, I really don't feel that has anything to do with it. It kind of makes me laugh a little bit when people say that formula-fed babies sleep through the night faster than breastfed babies. I just don't find that that's the case. If formula is going to buy you any extra time, it's usually only an hour. It's funny because it's not cement in their stomach. It doesn't last forever. And so, it might be a little bit more difficult to digest and last a little bit longer, but not much. So instead of every 3 hours, you might be getting every 4, which still isn't great. Okay, so just erase that from your mind. It has nothing to do with your breastfeeding. And let's see if we can work this out. My guess is that he breastfeeds to sleep, and that might be more your issue that you're dealing with, Lisa, is that he's using breastfeeding as his vehicle back into sleep, probably at bedtime and definitely through the night. Now, you haven't mentioned his weight, but I'm just going to assume that he's a healthy, happy 5.5-month-old. And so, in my experience, there are lots of 5.5-month-olds who can sleep all night, and by all night, I mean 12 hours, without a feed. So that might be something you want to discuss with your doctor and see if you've got the green light on that. But definitely how you feed needs to change a little. And I would start at bedtime. So again, set up a nice bedtime routine that's really step orientated so that his mind and body fall into line, and it becomes really predictable for him. Every night's the same. And if there's a feed in the routine somewhere, make sure that he stays awake through the feed, okay? A lot of people, and even people will write to me and say, well, she falls asleep on the feed, but then I wake her up after the fact. And you really can't even do that, okay? Especially if you're trying to break a nurse-sleep association. Why let her fall asleep there? It almost doesn't seem fair in that she falls asleep at the breast, but you don't let her stay there. You wake her up. And so that can really frustrate a baby. So what you want to do is break the connection that feeding has anything to do with sleep at all, okay? Yes, it's a nice, lovely time. It's cuddle times with mom. It's feeding, but that's its only 2 jobs, okay? It shouldn't be involved in sleep at all. So make sure he stays awake through the feed. Tickle him, talk to him, take him on and off, whatever you have to do to really keep him with you. And then he goes to his crib awake, okay? And that's your first goal, is just how to get him to fall asleep without relying on you at bedtime, okay? And I would suggest a stay in the room method. It's outlined in the program, moving away every 3 days until you're out of the room, and letting him learn how to do this more independently. And then for the night wakings, you might want to just see how it goes. Often by just teaching a baby the skills he needs for getting to sleep at bedtime changes the whole atmosphere of the night, meaning the stretches to get longer and longer naturally until, a month from now they're not there anymore at all. That would be a best case scenario. And so for a lot of people, I'll say, well, why don't you just see what happens? Really focus on the bedtime part, and then kind of let the night emerge on its own and see how it goes. The one thing you want to do, though, is when you do feed him, if you do decide to feed him, and really, 4 times a night, there's no reason why he needs 4 feedings a night. I think we can all agree that that's too many. So I'd cut it down to 1, 2 at the most, and you might decide yourself what times those are and when they're going to happen. But don't nurse him back to sleep in the night either, okay? Because you don't want him to think, I'll do it myself at bedtime and then I'll take the easy road all through the rest of the night. You really want him to master a skill and use it 100% of the time. So do the same thing, turn on the light, watch him, poke him, tickle him, talk to him, whatever you have to do to keep him awake through the night feed, then back to the crib awake, okay? And give it a week or two. And if nights are improving, then great, you're on the right track, don't worry. If they're not, meaning he's still up randomly, 4 times a night, and nothing's really improving, or in fact it feels worse, then you know that the feeding is probably the issue, meaning that he can't quite figure out what's going on. Sometimes he wakes up and gets a feed, other times he wakes up and he doesn't, and so some babies can become really confused by that and start waking up, randomly all over the place, wondering, is it feed time, isn't it? I don't know, I'm going to see what happens. And so if that's the case, you'll have to consider the option of just pulling his night feeds cold turkey and just getting him, really consistently sleeping through the night. Okay, so those are your two options. But again, it starts with the bedtime and then the night follows. So I encourage you to get started, and thanks a lot for your question. Sleep well.